Hello from NATO's broadcast facilities, and thank you for indulging this recorded session. We're terribly sorry not to be able to attend the event in person and wish you a successful 2022 AMEC Summit. Your theme of communicators at the data table is close to our hearts. As an alum of the United Nations, most recently UNICEF, an active participant in AMEC, I'm honored to be participating in this summit. I'll start by situating myself at NATO, after which I'll walk briefly through the role of data in our communication. I'll go into some of our recent communication work through the lens of data, and follow with a look to the future. My TLDR, or key takeaway, is that our data are core to building resilience and building support among allied populations. My name is Rebecca Obstler. I joined NATO in early 2018. My role is head of the Communication Services section, which is part of the Public Diplomacy Division at NATO headquarters in Brussels. The Public Diplomacy Division builds awareness of and support for the Alliance among allied audiences through its activities. A big part of building support for the Alliance, particularly given the complexity of the information space, is building resilience among allied populations, including against disinformation. Our work is guided by an annual communication strategy, underpinned by audience research, and informed by meaningful evaluation of our activities. I lead the team who are responsible for digital outreach. The team numbers 30 across such functions as social media, multimedia, web, and broadcast. We hail from 12 different allies. Given the nature of what we do, we collaborate closely with colleagues within our division, outside our division, at national delegations, at military commands, and of course with a variety of external partners. We are, of course, digital, so let me pause to show don't tell about our work and, more broadly, why NATO would invest in digital diplomacy. So let's talk data, and, in particular, the buffet that sits on this communicator's table. NATO is invested in data across the enterprise. In fact, Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg held a research post at the National Statistical Institute of Norway early in his career, and he maintains a keen interest in research, data, and statistics to this day. NATO brought on its first Chief Information Officer last year, and an increasing number of data scientists are joining across a variety of work areas. The research program is expanding. It's no surprise that the Allies agreed a framework for data exploitation last year. Data are both a strategic resource and a cause for concern. Here in the communications area, data are encoded in our DNA. Our decision-making is based on evidence provided by data. Our communication strategy is audience-led. We use our audience research to identify priority audiences, and we run rolling alliance-wide polling across NATO's 30 allied nations to inform communications policy and strategy. We invest in data collection tools that monitor media coverage and analyze trends on social media. We use services that spot our video assets on television. We track narrative threads about NATO, along with themes and topics that are of strategic importance to the alliance. We are continually striving to understand and improve our own performance, drawing our insight from select voice, reach, and engagement metrics and analytics. Like all of you, we use these data to forward our communication objectives, which, in our case, forward allied objectives, such as building resilience among our populations. I'll move on to some of our recent communication. It's unlikely I need to outline the present challenges to our security as we barrel into the 3-month mark of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So let's look at what we are seeing and how NATO communication is responding. because communication is part of the Alliance's steadfast commitment to keeping its nearly 1 billion citizens, our nations and our values, safe. First, some anecdata. 2 weeks ago, I went on a city break to visit a friend. Her partner expressed his strong opinions about his government's and Europe's response to the Russian invasion through what I'm sure he did not realize are Kremlin talking points and possibly information operations. I recognize them because we study the use and trajectory of information. But it's not every day that I personally encounter an audience member who presents me with the effects of hostile information. People base their opinions on the information they consume from sources they trust. So, what happens when information is weaponized, pervading sources we trust, making differentiation among misinformation, disinformation, malign information activities, and some version of the truth blend inscrutably? I hear Kremlin talking points from my friend's partner on holiday. Because of the outsized and pernicious effect the use of information as an armament has on the perception of fact, building resilient societies is a key objective for NATO as a first line of defense. One way NATO works to build resilience to hostile information is with fact-based, credible public communications. I'll show you an example before I move on. I'll spare you looking through a decade of NATO communication and tell you that the stark message of this video was unprecedented. Posted nearly 4 weeks after Russia's invasion, the video laid out statements from the Kremlin against facts to illustrate the message. Russia is lying and suppressing independent journalism and freedom of speech to prevent discovery of the truth. As with any international governmental organization, we are extremely careful about the words and images we use. And yet, this strong messaging found no resistance as the video was being developed, but rather encouragement to be even stronger and bolder. What brought us to this point? Let's look at how we conceptualize our communication to build resilience. First, I'll outline the approach. NATO has a twin-track approach to countering disinformation known as the Understand and Engage model. In brief, we build understanding of the information environment and our audiences, and then use this information to engage our audiences. Depending on the nature of what we are observing and its potential impact, we deploy various tools from our countering disinformation toolbox, be it to pre-bunk the information, to ignore it, to set the record straight, to respond directly. And then we measure the impact of our activities and adjust accordingly. The understand function includes two main and linked lines of effort. First, understanding the information space. Our media monitoring program and our information environment assessment, or IEA, capabilities provide insights into the environment into which we are communicating and the information against which we are competing. Second, our audience research program helps us know the people who are active in this space and whom we are trying to engage. IEA is about pointing powerful tools at data sets and generating actionable insights, as well as sharing knowledge. Our understanding of the information space benefits from coordination with allies and like-minded partners to develop a common approach to countering hostile information activities. Our partners include the European Union, the United Nations, the NATO Strategic Communications Center of Excellence in Latvia, and the European Center of Excellence for Countering Hybrid Threats in Finland. Of course, I would be remiss not to mention that collaboration on measurement is why we are avid participants in AMEC and other like-minded organizations. In fact, last year, our 2020 research program was recognized with a Market Research Society Award for Business Impact of the Year Global. That brings me to the second line of effort, audience research. How do we obtain information about our audiences? We ask. Our audience research program polls our audiences to gather data on core metrics such as support for collective defense, support for defense spending, and support for collaboration between Europe and North America on defense and security. Using face-to-face and online polling, the quantitative program aims to inform decision-making and communication strategy, identify priority audiences, optimize messaging and channel strategy, and benchmark and monitor sentiment on key metrics. Putting these sources together helps us build a picture so that we know whom we need to engage in order to build support. We also ask our audiences where and how they consume information, which complements the data on what kinds of information they are seeing there. So how do we operationalize this knowledge? I'm going to shift to the engage function now and provide a series of examples. Each one will outline an input to our activity and the way in which we use our data to shape communication. One simple input to our communication is what we are seeing in the earned space. Our media monitoring and IEA tools help us follow the earned communication that will drive audiences to our owned platforms, which we are, of course, also monitoring. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the news cycle drove extraordinary web traffic through search, so we quickly developed a landing page as a one-stop shop for NATO's response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine to make sure we could help these users find the information they sought. We also use the immediacy and reach of social media outreach to our target audiences in order to deliver information to them in the places in which they are active. When NATO activated its response force, a short explainer video about what that meant became one of our most engaged Twitter posts of all time. Our audiences were hungry for facts, and we served them up. This kind of communication benefits from assessment, which we have been conducting throughout to gauge interest in and uptake of these efforts. Of course, the messaging of that video was critical at that time. NATO is reinforcing the eastern flank to protect the alliance's territory and deter Russia from invading our eastern allies. This leads to another obvious input, what we actually want to articulate. We are a political organization, after all. This input comes from our own position, plus the information we are seeing that does not align with it. The alliance is disgusted by this brutal and unprovoked full-scale invasion that has dramatically changed the security landscape of Europe, and we underscore our support for Ukraine, a peaceful and democratic country and close NATO partner. At the same time, we are committed to protecting every inch of our territory. Our unity of purpose had to be evident across our shared landscape. What we knew about the information space informed the preparation of communications direction and guidance that steered our joint messaging, joint among NATO, the chain of command, and allies. You can see throughout our digital landscape the approaches we have taken through this dangerous period to contest false narratives in the information space. In the case of the Stop the Lies video, we decided that it was time to go bold and call out bald-faced lies that were provably false. This video is a direct response to information we considered to be both threatening and gaining traction among our populations. We translated the strong message for our Russian-speaking audiences too. We used factual information to fight disinformation. IEA media analysis and audience research have then, in turn, helped us to gauge the effectiveness of what we are doing and course correct what hasn't been working. And we use all of these insights to inform the next steps. The next example is in campaign form. We have created a small communication campaign targeting allied audiences in Eastern Europe who need reassurance that NATO is committing to protecting every inch of our territory, but who we know are being bombarded with information to the contrary. We are always thinking about how to segment the 1 billion people who live in our 30 allied nations effectively. Audience insight has helped us. The strategy we chose was for local partners to communicate with their own audiences in order to reach and engage more relevant audiences. We created content and seeded it with partners in each country selected on the basis of data related to audience trust. We are continuing to roll out this mini-campaign and assessing its uptake and effect at present. I'll add one final example before turning to the future. Another way NATO can use its knowledge to engage its priority audiences is to organize joint public outreach events in allied and partner countries. At this point in the COVID-19 pandemic, these events take place in person, online, or in hybrid format. NATO has a grant program that invites NGOs, think tanks, and universities to submit innovative projects aimed at enhancing societal resilience to disinformation. The participants engage and, in turn, serve as influencers who engage their own networks. Organizers provide data on participation and poll participants to understand how the activity was received and whether participants' perception was altered. In sum, especially during this serious challenge to security with a distinct component of widespread malign use of information, we take our evidence base seriously. The truth is, we are operating within a blur. The wild manipulation of information can have effects ranging from building confusion to sowing discord to being an outright weapon of war. The awareness we have of our audiences and the information space is one of our most powerful tools. We can use it to build trust in and support for NATO, to position it as an organization that people feel protects them, and to increase confidence in allies and partners that NATO strengthens our collective ability to address security threats. I'll close with a look forward. What's new in this area? Constant adaptation to keep pace with our dynamic audiences. Our goal, and really the goal for all communication, is to reach our audiences in the places in which they are active on the devices that they use with content that interests them. Variables that keep changing. We've begun to leverage our research program even further to inform our communications content and channel strategy. We are improving our share of voice by moving past messaging and themes that resonate with our target audiences to deploying influencers in those thematic areas who maintain credibility with their audiences. We are enhancing our reach by leveraging those channels in which our audiences are active but NATO is not. We are boosting engagement by experimenting with new formats on the channels we do use and piloting novel content. We are also talking about the data themselves, a communication opportunity for our audiences to situate themselves along the spectrum of knowledge about NATO and fill their own knowledge gaps. We're also going back to basics and building capability in media literacy. And finally, given that data are a strategic resource, we are building out our IEA capability and the future-proof staff who will need to execute it, and who generate regular reports to support informed decision-making. Thanks for hearing a bit about our seat at the data table. I'm sorry not to be on hand to answer questions, but you know where to find us if you would like to follow up. I'd also invite you to join the conversation on our @NATO social media accounts, and also our @NATO po-Ruski accounts if you speak Russian. Hopefully this peek at our buffet has helped build understanding of why our plate looks the way it does.